A huge business fight is happening right now. Two Chinese companies are in the biggest shopping war ever seen. On one side, Shein, the fashion company that took over America in 14 years. On the other side, Temu, the new company that spent $1.5 billion to fight back. Both companies sell $3 dresses, both promise crazy low prices, but only one can win the future of online shopping. In May 2023, something shocking happened. The 14-year winner was beaten in just 8 months. Business experts were confused. Their predictions were wrong. The shopping world had never seen anything like it. Temu had done something impossible. They beat Shein at their own game. But this win came with a big problem. By 2026, both companies found out they were fighting the wrong enemy. The government was coming for them. New rules were about to destroy their $3 dress business model. And the real winner of this war might be nobody. This is Temu versus Shein, the fight for the future of cheap shopping. And what happens next will decide who controls online shopping for the next 10 years. But first, you need to know how a wedding dress business accidentally created the most powerful force in modern shopping. The story begins in 2008 in China. A man named Chris Xu started a small business selling wedding dresses online. For the first few years, nobody paid attention to this little company. But then in the early 2000s, Chris Xu made a decision that changed everything. He stopped selling wedding dresses, and he started selling fast fashion to young women in America and Europe. But this was not just normal fast fashion. Xu built a supply chain so fast it was almost unbelievable. Zara and H&M took 6 weeks to turn a trend into a product. Shein was doing it in 3 days, 72 hours from idea to your phone screen. By 2020, something incredible happened. Shein became the most downloaded shopping app in America. It beat Amazon, it beat Walmart, it beat everyone. Revenue was growing 74.5% every year for almost a decade. Thousands of new products appeared every single day. But Shein's secret was not just speed, it was data. The platform watched social media trends in real time. It saw what young women liked. Then it had those products ready before other companies even noticed the trend existed. Fast fashion had always been fast. Shein made it instant. For 14 years, Shein built an empire that nobody could touch. Then in September 2022, a competitor launched that did not just copy Shein's model. It redesigned the entire game. In September 2022, a new player entered the game, Temu. But this was not a quiet launch. This was an attack. Temu was backed by PDD Holdings, a huge Chinese company with unlimited money. And they decided to spend $1.5 billion on advertising. Most of it went to Super Bowl ads in 2023. Over 100 million Americans saw Temu's message in one night. The tagline was simple: shop like a billionaire. The promise was even simpler: everything you want at impossible prices. A $3 dress, a $7 kitchen gadget, a $12 wireless earbud. This was not just cheap. This made Shein look expensive, but Temu's secret weapon was different from Shein's. Shein makes and stores their own products. Temu connects American shoppers directly to millions of Chinese factories. Temu does not own the products. It owns the platform, and that difference would change everything. The Super Bowl ads were not just marketing, they were a declaration of war. Temu was telling Shein, Amazon, Walmart, and every other shopping company, we have unlimited money, unlimited suppliers, and we are coming for your customers. The plan worked. Within months, Temu was everywhere. But what happened next shocked the entire shopping world. Temu did not just compete with Shein, it beat them in 8 months. In May 2023, just 8 months after starting, something unbelievable happened. Temu beat Shein in US sales. This should have been impossible. Shein had spent 14 years building their brand, perfecting their supply chains, dominating American fashion. Temu spent $1.5 billion on ads, offered even lower prices, and simply bought customers faster than anyone had ever tried. Business experts were shocked. They had never seen anything like this in shopping history. Industry leaders called emergency meetings. Investment banks rewrote their reports overnight. The retail world was scrambling to understand how a brand new company could destroy a 14-year empire so quickly. The win was not slow, it was sudden and complete. By the end of 2023, the numbers told the whole story. Temu had 1.8% of all online shopping talk. Shein had 1.01%. Despite being around for 16 years, Shein was losing. Temu had proven something scary. With enough money and the right plan, you could rewrite the entire shopping world in less than a year. But the takeover showed something even more important about shoppers today. Brand loyalty is dead. Customers did not care that Shein had been around for over a decade. They only cared about price, and Temu's prices were lower. Temu had beaten Shein in sales, but the real scoreboard was not visible yet. The 2025 financial results that would show just how massive both companies had become? By the end of 2025, the final numbers were in, and they told an incredible story. Temu made $72.7 billion in total sales. Shein made $65.7 billion. Let that sink in for a moment. In just 3 years, Temu had not only caught up to Shein, they had beaten them. A company that started from zero in September 2022 was now bigger than the 14-year empire. The company that arrived last was now first. This was not just a business victory. This was a complete rewriting of how fast a company could grow. Wall Street analysts were calling it the most shocking turnaround in retail history. Venture capitalists were studying Temu's playbook like a war manual. Competitors around the world were panicking. If Temu could destroy Shein in 3 years, who was safe? But the numbers also revealed something else. Both companies were slowing down. Shein was projected to grow just 6.5% in 2026. Temu was projected to grow just 13.4%. Compare that to the triple-digit growth both companies had in previous years. The days of crazy growth were over. The party was ending. The financial lead did not mean Temu had won the war. It meant both companies had hit the same wall. Government pressure, customer complaints, tariff threats, problems that neither company was built to handle. Winning the 2025 scoreboard did not mean winning the future, because the battlefield was about to change completely. Temu led in total sales, but Shein had something Temu did not have: complete dominance in the one category that actually defined their brand. While Temu led in total sales, Shein still had one powerful weapon: fashion. Shein owns 9% of the global fashion market for online shopping across borders. That is huge. 14 years of building fashion supply chains, 14 years of learning what young women want, 14 years of trust. This was Shein's fortress, their safe space. But Temu had a different plan. Instead of just fighting Shein in fashion, they expanded everywhere: home goods, electronics, car accessories, beauty products, sports equipment, and the numbers were scary for Shein. In home goods alone, Temu had 2.18% of all online shopping talk. Shein had only 0.18%. That is 12 times bigger in a market worth billions. Here was the problem for both companies. Shein is a fashion company that tried to sell other things. Temu is a marketplace that happens to sell fashion. Shein cannot compete with Temu's variety because they would have to rebuild their entire business. Temu can compete with Shein in fashion by simply adding more fashion sellers to their platform. But here was the twist. Shein's fashion dominance was both their greatest strength and their biggest weakness. They were strong in one category, but that category was getting smaller as a percentage of total online shopping. Customers were spending more money on home goods, electronics, and everyday essentials, all areas where Temu was crushing Shein. Shein was the king of a kingdom that was getting smaller every year. Temu was building an empire across every category that mattered, but category dominance was just one part of the battle. There was another number that revealed who was actually winning the hearts of American shoppers, and this number would shock everyone. By January 2025, researchers asked American shoppers a simple question: have you ever used Temu? 44% of adults said yes. Then they asked about Shein. Only 31% said they had used it. Think about what this means. Temu, the company that started in 2022, had reached more American households than Shein. Shein, the company that had been building its brand for over 14 years, a 13-point lead for a platform that was barely 2 years old. This was not just about sales, this was about mind share. Temu had become a household name, faster than any shopping platform in modern history. Shein had spent over a decade building brand recognition through social media, influencers, and word of mouth. Temu did it in 18 months through massive advertising and impossible prices. But the bad news for Shein did not stop there. For the first time since 2021, Shein's market share in fashion actually went down. In 2024, Shein had 1.8% of the US fashion market. In 2025, they had 1.7%. That might sound small, but in the business world, going backwards is terrifying. In September 2025 alone, Shein's US sales dropped 8% compared to the same month in 2024. This was their second worst monthly performance in 3 years. The writing was on the wall. The adoption gap revealed a harsh truth. Temu was not just competing with Shein, they were eating Shein's lunch. The 13-point penetration lead meant Temu had reached millions of households that had never shopped on Shein, while also converting some customers who used to shop on Shein. Temu was not just taking new customers, they were stealing Shein's existing customers too. The momentum was undeniable. Temu was winning consumers. Temu was winning categories. Temu was winning sales. Shein was losing ground on every front. It looked like the war was over. But then something happened that neither company saw coming. A threat that could destroy both business models at the same time. A threat that made their competition with each other completely irrelevant, because suddenly both companies were fighting for their survival. But then both companies discovered they had been fighting the wrong enemy. There was a secret that made their entire business possible, a loophole in US law that most Americans had never heard of. It was called the de minimis exemption. Here is how it worked. Any package from China worth less than $800 could enter America tax-free. No import fees, no tariffs, no extra costs. This rule is what made $3 dresses possible. This rule is what made $7 gadgets possible. Without this rule, both companies were dead. And in early 2025, President Donald Trump decided to kill it. He wanted to close this loophole as part of his plan to fight China. Suddenly, everything changed. Without the de minimis exemption, that $3 dress becomes a $10 dress once taxes are added. The $7 kitchen gadget becomes $15. The entire reason millions of Americans were willing to wait 3 weeks for packages from China disappears. Both companies panicked. Temu pulled back their US advertising immediately. They stopped Chinese sellers from selling directly to American shoppers. Shein began moving their manufacturing to the US and UK to avoid the taxes. But these were not solutions. These were desperate attempts to survive. The irony was brutal. Temu and Shein had been fighting each other for market dominance. Billions of dollars spent on advertising, years of competition, millions of customers won and lost. But now they were facing the same enemy. Government regulation that threatened to destroy the foundation both empires were built on. Their competition with each other suddenly seemed pointless compared to the survival challenge. Both companies had built their entire business model on this one loophole: cheap manufacturing in China, tax-free shipping to America, impossible prices that traditional retailers could not match. Remove that loophole, and both companies would have to completely rebuild their business or die. The tariff threat was announced for March 2025. Both companies had a few months to figure out how to survive. But before the new rules took effect, something unexpected happened, something that nobody saw coming. American consumers panicked. When American consumers realized the $3 dresses were about to disappear, something crazy happened. They went shopping like never before. In March 2025, just weeks before the new tariff rules would start, both companies saw something incredible. Sales exploded. Shein saw their revenue grow 29% in March compared to the same month the year before. But April was even more insane. In just the first 11 days of April, Shein's sales grew 38%. Temu was doing even better, 46% growth in March, 60% growth in the first 11 days of April. Americans were stockpiling everything they could get their hands on: makeup brushes, home appliances, clothes, phone cases, kitchen gadgets, anything they could order before prices went up. This was not normal shopping. This was panic shopping. Bloomberg, one of the biggest financial news companies, confirmed what was happening through credit card data. This was not a rumor. This was not guessing. This was real panic buying behavior at a scale that retail experts had never seen outside of Black Friday or the pandemic. Families were ordering dozens of items they did not even need right now. College students were buying clothes for the next 2 years. Parents were stocking up on toys for Christmas 2025 in April. The panic buying surge revealed something shocking about American consumers. They knew the prices were fake. They knew the prices were only possible because of a government loophole. They knew it was ending. But instead of questioning whether $3 dresses were sustainable or ethical, they just bought as much as possible before the window closed. Price had completely taken over every other consideration. Americans did not care about working conditions in Chinese factories. They did not care about environmental impact. They did not care about supporting local businesses. They only cared about getting deals before the deals disappeared. Both Temu and Shein were making record profits while knowing their business model was about to be destroyed. It was like a going out of business sale for an entire industry. But this surge could not last forever. The tariffs were coming whether people liked it or not. The panic buying was temporary, and as 2026 arrived, both companies discovered they had an even bigger problem than government regulation. Something even more dangerous than tariffs was building: consumer backlash. And this time, it was not just governments coming for them, it was their own customers. By March 2026, something unexpected happened. A new enemy appeared that neither company had planned for: their own customers. Research from a major retail technology show revealed something shocking. 54% of shoppers in the UK said their government should change the rules to stop cheap products from flooding the market. This was not just happening in the UK. The same feeling was spreading across Europe and America. For the first time, regular people were starting to turn against the ultra-cheap model both companies had built their empires on. This was not about tariffs anymore. This was about right and wrong. People were starting to ask hard questions. How can a dress cost $3? What are the workers in Chinese factories being paid? How much pollution is created shipping millions of tiny packages by airplane? What happens to all these cheap products when they break after a few weeks? Media companies started investigating working conditions in the factories that made Temu and Shein products. They found problems. Environmental groups started calculating the carbon emissions from shipping millions of individual packages by air from China to America. The numbers were bad. Politicians in the US and Europe began talking about these companies differently. They stopped calling them retail innovators and started calling them threats to local jobs and fair wages. The backlash revealed something important. Temu and Shein had won the price war, but they were losing the story war. Customers were still buying from both companies, but they were starting to feel guilty about it. And guilt is something that governments can use against companies. Guilt is harder to fight than regulation. You cannot lobby against people feeling bad about their choices. Both companies had spent billions fighting each other, but they had ignored the bigger fight: the fight for hearts and minds, the fight to convince people that ultra-cheap shopping was good for the world, and they were losing that fight. Government regulation was tightening, public opinion was turning, growth was slowing. Both companies were entering 2026 with their hypergrowth era over. Their war against each other had distracted them from the real threat. The world was turning against both of them, so who actually wins? Temu and Shein are not just competing with each other, they are competing with time. The government loopholes that made both companies possible are closing. Consumer guilt is rising. Public opinion is turning. Both platforms are entering 2026 with growth rates that look nothing like their explosive early years. Both companies were built on a foundation that was always temporary: a regulatory loophole, a tariff exemption, and customers willing to ignore impossibly cheap goods. That foundation is crumbling. And when it collapses, neither business model survives. When explosive growth is built on government rules rather than value creation, you are always one policy change away from dying. You can grow fast, you can beat competitors in 8 months, but the system can change overnight. Somewhere right now, a shopper is adding a $3 dress to their cart, and a government official is writing the policy that will make it illegal. The game is not over yet, but the clock is ticking. The real competition was never Temu versus Shein. It was both of them versus the end of the system that made them possible. From Shein's origins to Temu's billion-dollar blitz to regulatory threats destroying both, you've seen the complete breakdown. This shows hypergrowth built on loopholes is temporary. Hit subscribe and tell us, have you bought from either platform? Would you still shop there if prices increase 30%?